I would say is this, and a lot of people are saying this, it was really interesting to see how America did come out to voice their opinion on who they thought, and their vote and exercise their democracy, which is what the country needs.
Yeah.
For so long, I think the results of maybe even the last election were because people kind of given up or were feeling a little bit apathetic about the whole thing. And then they got exactly, kind of what
apathy gets you.
Yeah,
Yep,
what
exactly.
apathy gets you. Exactly. And so sometimes you got to go to those depths or to that place to realize like that's not a good answer for the problem. If I'm going to sit around and complain about it, I got to get out there and change it. And so again, along the election lines, I mean, I have my convictions about very, very specific things, and neither candidate that we had this year fulfills the things that are really important to me at every level. So that's a challenge for me when I think about like, what is this, an election or is this a selection, and how that impacts things. I don't want to get too political, but politics is a part of living in America, and it's part of being an American. And if you bury yourself in this, your head in the sand about that, and religion for that matter, and you just say, oh, it just makes me uncomfortable, I don't want to talk about it. Well, when you're done in the fucking third grade, then let me know. And then, you're going to find out real fast how far that gets you in life, because then what that ends up leading to is a total disconnect from it because you don't understand it, or you can't, or you don't want to, which then leads to the apathy, which then leads to this hard like diving into stuff that you don't really know about, and you're trying to learn it all maybe, or you're taking everybody's opinions and trying to figure it out. And I think that's just kind of where things have been. It's got to get worse before it gets better, I think. But I think, like, particularly here in the state, we made a couple of really hard turns, I think, for the better as a state, in my opinion, with some of the DAs that we have in some very influential areas. Prop 36 was voted no against, which was Prop 47 got turned down a few weeks before. These are major bills that have impacted crime and basically making crime not criminal anymore. And those are things that we're seeing and we see every single day on our streets, and in our neighborhoods. So I saw some really positive things happening, but just kind of looking at how this whole thing turned out, I was really interested. It's going to be interesting to see how it works out. And in how America responds. I got to be honest, like I thought, and it's a little early still, but I thought we would see some emotional reactions erupt out kind of on the streets here. And I know that was kind of happening in some areas, but I think the closeness of the race and the realities of kind of how it was presented or may be helpful there. I don't want to speak too soon. The weekend hasn't happened yet. And usually when people are off work and they have time to sit around and think about it or do nothing but cause trouble, that's when that happens. But not like we've seen sort of with some other things in the past. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I'm curious on your take, on you guys' take, and kind of watching it or not watching it, or, where your thoughts are on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, initially some of the reaction, like I feel like I've seen a strong reaction even just from people online, but it's weird. There felt so much stress and buildup around it, but it kind of feels like, the dust is already a little settled. Like we haven't seen.
Or it's the calm before the storm.
Before the storm, exactly. And that's where it's just kind of this weird, I feel like there's just so much like confusion and people just being distraught in an election that I think, and truthfully, even before the election, I think this is the most that I've had conversations with people about no one really feeling good, like you said, about either candidate, and really no one feeling like confident or like, this is what I want to do. And that's like a weird feeling where you feel there's not this where it's like, oh no, you really want this person or really want this person. It was a lot more of, I don't want that person.
Yep. Oh yeah.
And so seeing the emotion and seeing the reaction now, it's almost been less dramatic than I thought it was, but you'd almost feel this
anticlimactic
a little bit, but then it almost feels a little like heavier emotionally in some ways too. So I'm kind of still processing how I feel about everything, but it's interesting interacting with like different people on both sides as well. So.
Oh, yeah, I think especially where we are here, that most of the people here are identifying with the losing team. Mm-hmm. So I think what we maybe what we're feeling or experiencing here in the Bay Area on the ground, I think is, like you said, the people who are distraught, people who are really upset, but mostly on social media. It's mostly on social media. It hasn't spilled into the streets, and Hopefully it doesn't.
Yeah.
You know, I think Scott and I, we made it a rule several years ago that we don't talk politics at work when people are in the gym. And so I've really stayed to that.
Good
Except
idea.
I do have this one client where I have talked politics with this person, and it's been interesting because that person and I seem to be pretty aligned on a lot of topics, but that's the only person that I have talked politics with in several years. And so the other thing is, that person said, so have you and Scott really talked about it? And I said, no, we really haven't talked about it as well. My daughter has asked me questions as far as who are you voting for, so on and so forth. And I've had conversations with her. And, you know, I just generally try to stay away from politics when it comes to conversations with friends and family, just because I personally haven't had very positive interactions. And so I think it's just better to be left alone. And my thing is if you can't handle yourself emotionally and have that conversation, I don't want to have that conversation with you. If it's going to cause a rift to where you're a bad person and I'm a good person or vice versa, let's just not even go there. So for me, it was about like filling out my ballot, delivering it, and Scott was out of town. So it was just Callie and I, and we had things to do. So we did see Scott's daughter earlier in the day, and I saw that she was looking at the results on her phone. I'm like, hey, how are you doing that? And so she took my phone and she helped set me up so I could keep, you know, with the times as far as what was happening. And so that was really awesome. But, you know, life was continuing on that night.
And it will.
So
it will continue
exactly.
on.
And it has continued on. So nobody died yet. The world hasn't ended yet.
Let's hope it stays that way. Yeah.
Man, you know, and it's interesting you're talking about being someone who put their head in the sand. And if I'm being honest, like that's kind of been me a lot over the years, because I've always had the philosophy that yes, it's important to know what's going on around you. And I've seen the impact of where your vote lies. And then I've seen that more, especially as I've, you know, gone into an adulthood longer and longer. But I think a lot of people get so caught up on politics on both sides, that especially we talk about social media and virtue signaling on there and wanting to have this idea of what they feel that they represent and what their vote is for. But then in their daily life and how they treat people and how they impact those around them does not reflect that at all. and it's very negative. And it was interesting. There's this guy, they can be a little cheesy, but he's called the Daily Stoic, if you've heard of him, which I love a lot of the Marcus Aurelius. I love all that, but he can get anyways, but he had a video that he had prepared and it looked like whether it was either candidate, and he posted it the morning after the election. And really the message was like, regardless if you are happy or unhappy with the outcome of that election, like as a person, you are still called to be virtuous and you're still called to impact people around you and still be good and still do things for the good of your community, still good things for the good of your family, your friends. And I have always identified more with having an intention of how I handle myself in my day-to-day versus how I handle myself in that. I have felt more called to that. But at the end of the day, if you know, there's a lot of emotion and distress right now going on really on both sides of the fear of what could happen and what has happened. But at the end of the day, like your impact on the people around you and knowing that just if someone has voted differently than you or had a different way of going about this is most people want what's best for the country, and most people, they just view different ways of going about it, and you need to control how you treat people going forward. That's just a big thing for me.
Well said.